One of the top reasons to use a Hong Kong company, obviously outside of the tax benefits, is the fact that it gets you access to some of the best banking in the world. Hong Kong has a very long history of being a very stable banking jurisdiction, a very stable place to hold your money, and it is very international friendly. It's a place where there's a lot of people coming from all kinds of places and they understand international businesses. But the question is, how do you actually get a bank account for your business? Because there's actually many cases where you might not even be able to get a bank account for your Hong Kong company. This has been a trend, not just in Hong Kong, but all around the world. Business banking has become a lot more difficult. It's not so straightforward anymore that you just form a company and then you could just pick any bank in that country and you'll just be able to open an account. Banks have become a lot stricter, and this is also the case in Hong Kong. So in this video, I'm going to cover a full guide on, first of all, how to open a Hong Kong bank account, how to make sure you can actually get one at all, and also which banks should you actually open accounts with, which ones are worth it, which ones are overrated, and in general how all of this works. Before we get started with the video, of course, the easiest way to make sure that you can open a bank account for your company is to use a service provider who has direct contacts to these banks, so they can essentially streamline this process. If you want to use my contacts, who I have verified, who I know what they're doing, you can check out also in the first link down below in the description. They will of course handle your company incorporation. What they essentially give is everything in one package, because when you open a Hong Kong company, there's actually quite a lot of things you need. You need to have a secretary, you're gonna need a company address, like all these kinds of things that you would otherwise, if you were doing this on your own, need to like find on your own online and use like 5 different service providers for all these things you need. You need to do annual audits, everything like that, like finding the right people to do that. Also, just packages all of this into one package. And if you actually add up all the costs of all the constituent parts of everything you need to set up a Hong Kong company, the service fee on top of that is extremely small when you use Awesome's service, and all the government fees, all the other fees and everything like that is also included in the fee that you pay them, which is, by the way, not the case with all service providers. This is something that you need to be careful about. So if you're looking to set up a Hong Kong company and get someone's help to also get you your bank account after, you can check out Awesome in the first link down in the description. And if you use that link, you also get 16% off on all of their services. Now, how do you open a Hong Kong business bank account? So generally we have 2 kinds of banks. We have digital banks and we have traditional banks, and the process for each of these will be slightly different. We'll cover more on that in a moment. But in general, what do you need? What kind of documents do you need? Well, obviously you need your certificate of incorporation. This is the document that you get when you actually incorporate your company with the Hong Kong government, and it proves that your company is legally registered in Hong Kong. You're going to need your business registration certificate, which is a slightly different document. I cover all of this, by the way, in detail, like what documents you get, like how to get all of this in my how to set up a Hong Kong company video. But you need that. You need your memorandum and articles of association, and you also need what's called a board resolution. That is essentially a resolution passed by the directors of the company that authorizes you as the director or whoever it is that is opening this bank account to actually open bank accounts on behalf of this company. So if you're doing this on your own, you want to make sure you get all these documents. Obviously, if you use an Awesome or a different service provider, they will take care of this for you. They will make sure you have all these documents and they're done correctly and everything like that. And then on top of that, the one thing that might trip many people up is that you need a proof of address. And this might come in the form of a utility bill or a rental agreement or something like that, which of course, if you have just like a virtual address or something like that, you might not have. And especially a lot of the traditional banks might require this, so they might require a physical address. Now, if you live in Hong Kong, you can use your home address as this proof of address. There's no problem with that, but mainly the problems will come for people who don't live in Hong Kong, and that is often the case when a lot of people are going to be using these Hong Kong companies. So you need to be sure to work with banks that don't require this if you don't have a physical office. Now, for non-residents, and again, most of the people probably watching this channel are not going to be residents of Hong Kong, because the real benefit of a Hong Kong company is that it's zero tax when it is not managed from Hong Kong. But for non-residents, there's going to be often additional documents that these banks are going to ask. They might ask, for example, for a full detailed business plan of like what your business does and everything like that. And often what I'm hearing from people is that these days, especially with these big name banks, you might need to kind of like convince them to take you on. Like, it's not as straightforward anymore, because what's happening in Hong Kong is that there's a lot of money coming into Hong Kong from especially mainland China. A lot of like very big money coming in. So if you're coming there to one of these banks like HSBC, DBS, you're like, hey, I want to deposit $5,000. Like, they're not really going to be interested in your $5,000 $10,000 when they have millions coming in from a lot of mainland China. A lot of people from there, a lot of businesses are like using Hong Kong as a gateway to access international markets. So that's one thing that has been happening that has been making it more difficult for especially foreigners or non-Chinese people to actually open these bank accounts. So they might ask you a lot of different documents. Like it might take some convincing to actually be able to open this account. So unfortunately, I can't give you an exact list of documents because it is kind of going to depend on the bank. Now, which banks can you use then? So in general, again, we have a digital banks that are like more modern. And then of course we have the traditional banks, the big name mainstream banks like HSBC, like DBS, Citi, all banks like this. Generally, for most people, especially if you're a smaller business, I would just go with one of these digital banks. It's going to be much easier to open these accounts. Your experience is probably actually going to be better because they are more geared towards people who run their businesses online. They're going to be more likely to actually understand your business, and they're going to be just a lot more modern. Now, of course, if you want to hold a lot of money in your company bank account, you have a much bigger operation, then one of the traditional banks can also work really well. So in terms of the digital banks, which ones would I recommend? Well, the popular ones are going to be Air Wallets, which you can use in all kinds of countries. They give you access to a multi-currency account as well as a multi-currency debit card as well. It's really good from what I hear for especially online businesses who deal internationally and things like that. Although I have heard some stories of your bank accounts being closed by Air Wallets, especially if you start transferring very big amounts in the beginning. So you might want to ease into like how much money you move through this if you're only using it. The other options in the market are, for example, Aspire that also, for example, has connections with. They also have multi-currency support. They use DBS Bank behind the scenes. So your money is actually held in DBS, which is one of the most stable banks in the world. And the benefit of Aspire or Air Wallets, for example, is that the SWIFT fees. So if you're making international transfers, the SWIFT charges are a bit lower with Aspire, so you might want to look into that as well. And then you have like many options out there in Hong Kong. It's a business hub. There's so many different options. You have currency. You have things like Wise as well. Obviously, you can use that. Although again, with things like Wise, because it's not a real bank, I would be more careful about just transferring very big amounts through it. There's been stories of them closing accounts and things like that. But I would say if you're a smaller business, you don't have like employees, you're quite a lean operation, and especially if you don't live in Hong Kong, you know, spending a lot of time there, then your life is probably going to be easier using one of these digital banks than the traditional banks. Because if you just look at the traditional banks, first of all, the process to actually open these accounts is going to be these days much more difficult. You might have to put up a lot of money in these accounts because of what we just discussed. With they have a lot of money, they might not be interested in your $5,000-$10,000. And in general, especially in Hong Kong, these kinds of banks just tend to be a lot more outdated in their processes. I've heard from a lot of people that a lot of these Hong Kong banks still tend to be very paper based. They literally might only be willing to send you documents using physical paper, or they might be telling you like, oh, could you sign this on paper and send it back to us, like post it to us, or like could you fax this to us? And like for us, like online business people, like this is just ideally not how we want to deal with our banks. So really I would ask yourself, like, do you even need one of these traditional banks for most leaner operations? Like, my opinion is that I might not even need one. In fact, all the businesses that I have right now I fully only use digital banks. I would only consider a traditional bank if I need like business loans or like letters of credit, like some very higher level services that just aren't that relevant for my business, because I just like to have the kinds of businesses that are very lean and like just don't require all these bells and whistles that you might be able to get with these traditional banks. And in general, you don't want to just go for the banks that have the biggest name. For example, HSBC Hong Kong, a very big name bank, but I've heard from so many people that they have had very bad experiences with HSBC in recent years. But obviously, you can use them if you need them. DBS is another one. They have a lot of the Western banks like Citi, for example, as well. So if you really need the traditional bank, I would just go to each of them, go to the ones that you're interested in, see what the requirements are, see if you can open them, because it can also be case by case, like who they deal with. Okay, we deal with this kind of businesses, but not this kind of businesses because we don't understand your e-commerce business or something like that. So it can be more challenging if you need that. So that is just something to keep in mind. Like even when you're considering which company to set up, if you really want to have a traditional bank, just understand that with Hong Kong, there might be more issues with that than you might imagine. So I hope that helps you. Obviously, I cannot give all the details for every single bank. Again, if you're happy to use one of these online banks, first of all, awesome, can just open all these accounts straight away. You don't even need to deal with anything. And these tend to be pretty reasonably good banks in my experience. Whereas if you need traditional banks, there might be some more issues there, although obviously you can open an account, and especially if you do live in Hong Kong, then things change, like they're a lot more open to that. With that said, if you're interested in the details on how to form a Hong Kong company from zero as a foreigner, all the requirements, how much is it all gonna cost, you can watch this video right here. So what's happening next? I will see you on the next one.